All right, folks, are you ready? We are at the 1960s, standard 24, and there's only one left after this. This is going to be fun. This is going to be exciting. Welcome to the 1960s. Don't be like Ruth Bader, the Supreme Court judge. Wake up. Let's finish strong. Here we go. What was the impact of social change movements and organizations of the 60s? Here we go. The 1960s were a decade of great, there's the word, social change. Many movements competed for Americans' attention. So there's a couple of different movements you'll have to pay attention to, including groups advocating rights. And that's what they're all fighting for. Rights for, first, we have African Americans. Then we have folks fighting for the Latinos. Also, farm workers and women. Another movement supported that big word, environmentalism. While these movements were sometimes described as liberal, there was also a conservative movement arising during the 60s. The standard measures your knowledge of these movements. All right, guys, look for the African American movement, Latino movement, farm workers movement, women's movement, environmental movement, and the conservative movement. Let's have some fun. Boom! Here we go. Let's look at the civil rights movement. All right. This will be your rights for your African Americans. We have two civil rights groups. All right. Prominent in the struggle for African Americans' rights in the, what's the year we're looking at? In the 60s. All right. First we have all right, let's see if I can write this whole word in here. It's called, you see it, the initial right here, SCLC. It's called the Student. All right. I just lied to y'all. I'm sorry. It is called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or it's also called the SCLC. And then we have this other group that's going to be fighting for African American rights, which will be, now you have your student, check it out, Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So we have the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and then the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the SNCC and the SCLC. All right, review the following breakdown to see how the SCLC and the SNCC started as similar organizations but grew to differ over time, especially in the Student Nonviolent, that nonviolence key here, Coordinating Committee, changing composition. Here we go. Don't worry about seeing the chart. I don't have a chart for you. All right. All right, so the big things I want you to look at after the Civil Rights Movement. Now, I know there should be a chart, but I'll make this fast for you. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference is going to be led by Martin Luther King. They're Christians. They're good folks. They want to be nonviolent. They're good folks. These folks are trying to make change in the Civil Rights Movement in a positive way. Then you have the students in college calling themselves Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Then they started that way. This group will become linked with the Black Panthers, and they will literally or figuratively drop the nonviolent. Don't scratch it out. They keep that name, and they become controversial in their methods. They become violent, this SNCC. All right, now let's move to our next movement. All right, another big movement in the 60s is the anti-Vietnam War movement. Americans against the war in Vietnam became more vocal in their opposition. Many anti-war groups started on, check this out, college campuses. So college can be good, it can also be bad. To urge the government to end, what are they trying to end? All right, not just the war, but the entire selective service. All right, which you guys know it as the draft. All right, they want to end the draft. And to bring, all right, what do we do? Bring home all American troops from, this is easy, from Vietnam. That's right. They used many of the same tactics, you'll learn about in a minute, all right, as groups fighting for civil rights, including sit-ins, you got to know that one, They also had marches and other demonstrations. Later, some protesters became more radical. All right? Some of the things they would do, they would burn or burning their draft cards. All right, they would go to prison rather than going to Vietnam. Some of them even left the country and they went to Canada. That's right, your anti-Vietnam War movement. Now let's look at the ladies' movement or the women's movement. All right, the National Organization of Women was founded in 1966 to promote, it's easy, women's rights. All right, and opportunities for American women. All right. All right. Now this became known as NOW. The national organization became known as NOW. Had its origins in the civil rights and anti-war movements of the early 60s. In both of these, women felt sidelined by men who led organizations like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and anti-Vietnam War groups. NOWs, or National Organization of Women, all right, their goals included, this is what they're looking for, equality in employment, political and social equality, and the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. That's what they were looking for. All right, now let's look at what's called the United Farm Workers Movement. And who's doing all the picking in the fields at this time? Latinos. That's who we're looking at. Latinos. All right, also protested to gain civil rights in the 1960s. Their leader was named, or his name is Cesar Chavez. All right, important person. You need to know this guy. Great American, Cesar Chavez, an American of Mexican descent who grew up picking crops in California with his family as, all right, founder of the United Farm Workers Movement. Chavez believed in peaceful methods to achieve his goals. In 1965, he started a nationwide, this is the big deal here, boycott of California grapes. You're thinking, no big deal. Well, imagine the grapes and not getting picked out of the field. People can't get their wine and their grapes, forcing grape growers to negotiate a contract with the United Farm Workers in 1970. This contract gave farm workers higher wages and other benefits for which they had been protesting through the 60s. Cesar Chavez, look him up. He's a great American. You'll enjoy it. There's actually a movie that's just been made about him. All right, the next movement is the environmental movement. All right, their goals are, here we go. Protecting the environment became important to many Americans. All right, there's a book you have to know. It's named Silent Spring. Oops. Silent Spring. I like my spring kind of loud. All right, Silent Spring, which is a 1962 book about, what do you think it's about? Pesticides. I thought pesticides were good. They help crops grow. Well, it's written by Rachel Carson. So Silent Spring, written by Rachel Carson, exposed dangers to the environment. This book led to the Water Act of 1965. Okay. The first Earth Day was celebrated in 1970 when almost every community across America and over 10,000 schools and 2,000 colleges organized events to raise awareness of environmental issues. Earth Day is still celebrated each year. Also in 1970, President, who's going to be our president there at this time? We're looking at President Nixon, created the Environmental Protection agency, or what we call the EPA. That's right, to set limits on, what was that first goal? To set limits on, what's the environment trying? It's trying to clean up what? Pollution, that's right. All right, conduct environmental research and assist state and local governments clean up polluted sites. There you go. Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, leading to Earth Day and the creation of the EPA. All right, and lastly, we have our conservative movement. Conservative movement. All right, and we're looking at 1964. All right, now the conservatives are what political party typically? The Republicans. All right, the Republicans nominated Senator Barry, and his name is Goldwater. Barry Goldwater for president, which was a sign of the rising power of America's conservative movement. Goldwater believed the federal government should not try to fix social and economic problems. It's not the government's job, such as poverty, discrimination, and lack of employment. That's right. His conservative proposals included, all right, his conservative proposals included selling, check this out, the TVA. So no more dams. So no more dam stores. Making, all right, here's another thing he said. No, all right, making Social Security, all right, let's check this out. So make Social Security optional. Meaning you don't have to get in it if you don't want to. And getting more involved in the Vietnam War. All right, he wanted to be more involved. Goldwater, all right, guess what? You ever heard of a President Goldwater? Well, he lost the election to, who would he lose the election to? President, here we go, Johnson, who said more American involvement in Vietnam would not solve the problems there. The conservative movement continued with the 1968 candidacy and election of the Republican Richard M. Nixon. He wanted to, Richard Nixon wanted to replace President Johnson's, all right, what was that, those programs of his? Lyndon B. Johnson came up with the Great Society programs with what Nixon called, it's a brand new program, federalism. All right, so we have new federalism trying to replace the Great Society. So that's a Richard Nixon thing. This conservative initiative would take away some federal government's powers, such as social welfare, and give them to the state and local governments. Basically saying that states should be in charge of welfare and solving social issue problems. All right, guys, that is standard 24. Let's have some fun with it.